The evening was buzzing with excitement. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a soft glow across the grand hall. The air smelled faintly of expensive perfume and fresh flowers. Everywhere, people were dressed in the finest clothes, silks, satin, tailored suits, and glittering jewelry. The crowd moved gracefully, sipping wine, exchanging polite smiles, and laughing at carefully chosen jokes. But amid all this luxury, there was a quiet, unnoticed presence, a woman who did not belong in the eyes of most of the guests. She walked slowly, almost as if she were floating, her steps soft against the polished marble floor. Her dress was simple, nothing flashy, nothing to catch attention. She carried a small bag, and her hair was tied back neatly. She didn't walk with the confident swagger of the millionaires and their guests. She didn't push her way through conversations or try to stand out. She simply moved with quiet dignity, observing everything around her. Many of the guests glanced at her once or twice and quickly looked away. Some whispered among themselves, "Who is she?" One person asked quietly, "Why is she even here?" Another replied. Their eyes were judgmental, their words filled with the unspoken assumption that she had no place in this glamorous event. No one realized that beneath her simple appearance lay a story that could touch hearts and change perspectives. Meanwhile, the millionaire, famous, wealthy, and used to being the center of attention, was greeting his guests near the entrance. He shook hands, smiled at familiar faces, and nodded at those he barely knew. He was a man of influence, a man whose life had been built on power, money, and recognition. Yet, in this room, where everyone seemed to be performing their best, he noticed something odd. A figure moving quietly among the crowd, unnoticed by others. Yet somehow commanding his curiosity, he watched her for a moment, trying to figure out why she seemed so different. She didn't laugh at the right jokes. She didn't flaunt wealth or status. She didn't seek to impress anyone. And yet there was a calmness in her eyes that he couldn't ignore. There was something about the way she observed the world around her, a subtle intelligence. A silent confidence, a quiet strength. The millionaire turned away, assuming she was just another guest without significance. He returned to his conversations, shaking hands and exchanging smiles. He was too used to people trying to impress him, trying to gain something from being near him. People in this room had motives, and he had learned to read them well. But he did not yet know that this woman was different. She had no hidden agenda, no need for approval, no desire to impress. She was simply herself. As she moved further into the hall, she noticed small details that others overlooked. She saw the nervous waiters carrying trays of champagne, trying not to spill a single drop. She saw the young musicians waiting nervously by the piano, their eyes darting toward the stage. She noticed the subtle tension in the air, people pretending to be relaxed, while inside, their minds were racing with thoughts about reputation, status, and appearances. She understood the world of wealth and luxury, not because she craved it, but because she had seen it from a distance and understood its effects on people. She found a quiet corner near a pillar and paused, letting her eyes take in the scene. She watched couples talk politely, their smiles not quite reaching their eyes. She watched groups of friends laughing a little too loudly, trying to draw attention. She noticed the little gestures, the flick of a wrist, the adjustment of a tie, the way someone tilted their head to look more elegant. And yet, she felt no need to participate in this performance. She was content to observe, to listen, to feel. Time passed and the room grew louder. Guests moved closer to the stage, anticipating the evening's main event. The millionaire took his place near the center, speaking to some important clients and making small talk. He barely remembered the woman he had noticed earlier, but she had not left his mind entirely. There was something about her presence that he couldn't define. He shrugged it off, thinking perhaps it was just a fleeting curiosity. After all, in a room full of people trying to impress, he was used to noticing unusual faces. But somehow, she was different from all the rest. Meanwhile, the woman continued to watch quietly. She had not come for the party, for the attention, or for recognition. She had her own reasons for being there, reasons she kept to herself. Her eyes occasionally drifted toward the piano, a small smile touching her lips. She knew music had a way of speaking the truth in a way that words never could. She had spent her life learning to express herself through the keys of a piano, and tonight she had a feeling that her music might find its way into this world. Even in a place filled with wealth and status. As the first guests began moving toward the stage, she stayed back, still unnoticed. People brushed past her, focused on their conversations, their selfies, their carefully planned appearances. No one offered her a drink, no one asked her name, no one paid attention. And yet, she did not feel invisible. She felt prepared. She felt ready. She understood that sometimes the most important moments happen when no one is watching, when the world is too busy with superficial judgments to notice the truth waiting to reveal itself. The millionaire, busy with greetings and introductions, still caught glimpses of her from time to time. Each time his curiosity grew, though he could not explain why. Something about her presence was unsettling, not in a threatening way, but in a way that made him question the patterns of this room, the rehearsed smiles, the pretentious laughter. He realized that most of these people, including himself, were performing for each other. But she was performing for no one. And that realization made him pause even for a brief moment. Moments like these are subtle, almost invisible. Yet they carry the weight of something extraordinary. The woman continued to stand quietly, observing, feeling, and preparing. She had been through challenges, faced obstacles, and spent countless hours perfecting her craft in the quiet of her own world. Now, she found herself in a place where appearances mattered more than talent, and connections mattered more than character. Yet she was not discouraged. She knew that one moment could change everything. She just didn't know when that moment would come. As the lights dimmed slightly and the attention of the crowd shifted toward the stage, the atmosphere began to change. Conversations softened, laughter quieted, and the room became expectant. Guests leaned toward each other, whispering about who might perform, who might speak, and who might impress. The millionaire adjusted his jacket, ready to take his seat in the spotlight of this social gathering. And still, she remained in the background, unnoticed by most, yet fully aware of the impact she could make. There is a strange power in being unnoticed. It allows observation without judgment, preparation without distraction, and reflection without pressure. She moved through the room with grace, invisible yet present. And in this invisible presence she carried a quiet strength that no wealth, no influence, and no pretense could match. She had a gift, one that would soon make every assumption in the room seem small and meaningless. But for now she waited patiently, letting the world continue its show while she quietly prepared for her own. No one knew her story. No one knew her struggles, and no one expected her to make a mark. And yet the millionaire, despite his focus on social appearances, could not shake the feeling that this woman, quiet, unassuming, unnoticed, was different. She was not like anyone else in the room. She did not seek approval. She did not compete. She simply existed with an authenticity that was impossible to ignore, even when ignored by most. And so, the evening continued. Champagne glasses clinked, laughter echoed, and the crowd moved closer to the stage. Guests whispered predictions and expectations, unaware that something real, something raw, and something unforgettable was about to happen. The woman stayed back, silent and calm, watching, waiting, and ready for the moment when her presence, her talent, and her heart would make everyone, including the millionaire, stop and pay attention. In the quiet corners of a noisy room, the first seeds of an extraordinary story were being planted. And though no one yet realized it, the night would not end the way anyone expected. The millionaire, the guests, and even the musicians did not yet know that the woman they barely noticed would soon remind them all of what truly matters: talent, courage, and the power of a single, honest expression. And in that moment, as the lights shimmered and the crowd prepared for the next performance, she took a deep breath. She didn't know how the night would unfold, but she knew she was ready. Unnoticed, underestimated, and underestimated by almost everyone in the room, she carried within her a gift that could not be ignored. The evening was about to change forever, and no one, not even the millionaire, would ever forget the moment when the quietest person in the room became the center of everyone's attention. The woman stayed quietly in the corner, watching the room with calm eyes. Around her, the atmosphere was changing. The chatter that had filled the hall earlier was slowly giving way to an expectant silence. Guests were glancing toward the stage, talking in hushed tones, and trying to predict what the night would bring. Many of them were confident in their assumptions. They had come here to see talent, but in their minds, it had to come from someone who looked the part, someone polished and familiar. They couldn't imagine that true talent might be hidden in the quietest corner of the room. She noticed these assumptions and smiled faintly to herself. People often judged based on appearances, on wealth, on status, and on what they were used to seeing. They rarely looked deeper. She had learned early in life that what truly mattered, skill, heart, and determination, was often invisible at first glance. Tonight, she didn't need recognition or approval. She just needed the moment, the chance to show what she had worked for all her life. The millionaire, still surrounded by his network of guests, noticed her again. This time, his curiosity was stronger. He couldn't explain why, but something about her calm demeanor, her quiet confidence, and the way she moved through the crowd caught his attention. He leaned toward a friend nearby. "Do you know who she is?" he asked quietly. The friend shrugged. "I have no idea. Maybe someone connected to the event? A last-minute guest?" He watched her for a few more moments, noting the way she observed without judgment, the way she seemed completely unbothered by the stares and whispers. While most people tried to fit in, to impress, or to stand out, she did none of those things. She simply existed, unafraid, unaffected, and unapologetically herself. That was unusual in a room filled with people competing for attention, and it made him uneasy in a way he hadn't expected. Meanwhile, other guests had begun to notice her too. Some whispered among themselves. "Who is that?" one asked. "She doesn't even seem like she belongs here." Another guest nodded. "Yes, she doesn't look like she's part of this world. But there's something different about her." Yet even with these whispered observations, no one approached her. No one thought to speak with her or include her in conversations. She remained distant, a quiet observer in a room full of performers. She didn't mind being unnoticed. In fact, she preferred it. Being invisible allowed her to truly see the people around her. She noticed small details that others overlooked. She saw the nervous smiles of those who tried too hard. She saw the subtle gestures of people trying to appear relaxed. She saw the hidden tensions, the fears, and the insecurities that lay beneath the polished surfaces. People were performing for each other, trying to fit into a world they had built their lives around. She was performing for no one, and that difference gave her strength. As the night moved forward, she began to feel a quiet anticipation growing within her. She knew that her moment was approaching, even if no one else could sense it. She had spent years preparing for this kind of opportunity, perfecting her skills in solitude, learning to express herself through music in a way that touched hearts. She didn't need applause or recognition to validate her talent, but she understood that when the time came, her performance could speak louder than any introduction or explanation. Meanwhile, the millionaire continued to observe her from a distance. He noticed the way she carried herself, the way she seemed so composed in a room that was anything but calm. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, yet she had an air of confidence that was undeniable. For the first time that evening, he felt a twinge of uncertainty. He realized that appearances could be deceiving. Wealth, power, and status did not always reveal the most important truths. And here, standing quietly, unnoticed by most, was someone who might teach him a lesson. He wasn't expecting. Other guests were beginning to speculate about the woman as well. Some thought she might be connected to the performers, perhaps a substitute for someone who couldn't attend. Others assumed she was an assistant or a distant relative of one of the organizers. But no one guessed the truth, that she had a talent so profound, so real, that it could stop the room in its tracks once it was revealed. She was ready, and she knew that the world around her had no idea what was coming. Time seemed to move differently for her. While others were caught up in social interactions, she was focused, mentally preparing herself for the moment when she would step forward. She breathed quietly, feeling the rhythm of the room, the subtle tension in the air, and the emotions of the people around her. Every movement, every glance, every whisper became part of her awareness. She was not nervous because she had learned long ago that nerves were only an obstacle if allowed to control you. Instead, she transformed that awareness into readiness. The millionaire, still watching her, began to feel a strange mixture of curiosity and respect. He didn't know her story, didn't know her background, didn't even know her name. Yet something about her presence suggested that she carried a quiet strength, a depth, and a confidence that was rare. He realized that for all his wealth and influence, he could not predict what she might do. And that realization made him both uneasy and intrigued. As the evening continued, small signs of anticipation began to ripple through the crowd. People whispered about the upcoming performance, about who might play and who might impress the audience. They assumed the performer would be someone well-known, someone polished, someone trained in the ways of public attention. No one guessed that the most extraordinary performance might come from the person who had blended into the background. Unnoticed by almost everyone, the woman continued to observe quietly. She noticed the subtle distractions, the way some guests were more concerned with their appearance than the event itself, the way others were trying to measure their importance by who they spoke to or where they stood. She did not judge, she did not resent, she simply observed. She had learned that people often reveal themselves through their small actions and subtle behaviors. And tonight she was watching, waiting, and learning. Just as she had for years, she also felt a quiet excitement building inside her. This was her opportunity, the moment where her years of practice, dedication, and perseverance could finally be shared. She had faced challenges, moments of doubt, and times when she wondered if anyone would ever notice her talent. But now, in this grand hall filled with people more concerned with appearances than substance, she had a chance to show the truth of her abilities. The millionaire, observing her more closely, began to feel a shift in his own perception. He realized that his assumptions had been premature, that his initial judgments had been based only on appearances. Here was someone who did not fit the mold of what he expected, yet there was something undeniable about her presence. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he knew that when the right moment came, she would leave an impression that could not be ignored. As the guests slowly moved closer to the stage, she remained in her quiet corner. She was patient, knowing that the right timing was crucial. She had learned that moments of greatness could not be rushed, that the impact of her talent would be strongest if revealed at the perfect time. She was ready to step forward, but only when the moment demanded it. Until then, she observed, she listened, and she prepared. Around her, the air was filled with a mix of anticipation and distraction. People chatted quietly, their attention divided between small talk and the stage. Some glanced at their phones, checking messages or taking photos. Some whispered predictions about who would perform, how well they would play, and who might be recognized. And yet, in the midst of all this noise and distraction, she remained focused, centered, and calm. There was a subtle power in her presence, one that did not rely on wealth, recognition, or attention. She carried herself with quiet dignity, a strength that was invisible but palpable. And although no one else fully realized it yet, her moment was coming. Soon, the world around her would stop, listen, and pay attention in a way that no wealth or status could command. The millionaire, still observing, felt a strange mix of curiosity, admiration, and unease. He had seen many talented people in his life, but there was something different about this woman. He could not predict what she might do, yet he sensed that when the moment arrived, it would change the room and perhaps even him in ways he could not yet imagine. And so the night continued, filled with quiet anticipation. Guests moved toward the stage, conversations softened, and the air grew heavier with expectation. She remained in her corner, unnoticed by most, yet fully aware of the power she carried. She had prepared for this moment for years, and now all her patience, practice, and perseverance were about to pay off. No one in the room knew her story, her struggles, or the depth of her talent. And yet, the stage was about to reveal the truth that appearances cannot hide, that wealth cannot command, and that status cannot define. The quiet woman in the corner, invisible to most, was about to become the center of attention, and nothing in the room would ever be the same again. The moment came quietly, almost without warning. The guest who had been scheduled to perform was nowhere to be found. Whispers filled the hall as people realized something was wrong. Some of the guests looked around nervously, unsure of what would happen next. The musicians backstage exchanged worried glances. The millionaire frowned slightly, noticing the sudden tension in the room. Everyone had been waiting for this performance, expecting someone polished and experienced. No one expected the solution to come from the quiet woman who had been standing unnoticed in the corner. She, however, had expected this moment. Her heart remained steady, her mind focused. She had spent years preparing for situations like this, not because she sought attention, but because she believed in her craft and her ability to express herself through music. She had learned that true talent is not about applause or recognition. It is about honesty, expression, and the courage to show the world who you truly are. Now the opportunity had arrived, and she was ready. A host stepped forward, looking around nervously. "Is there anyone here who can perform?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. The crowd was silent. Some people whispered excuses for why they could not help. Others shook their heads, thinking no one in the audience could possibly be prepared for such a moment. The millionaire scanned the room, a mixture of curiosity and mild amusement crossing his face. He had almost forgotten about the woman in the corner, but now something tugged at his attention. Slowly, she walked toward the piano. Her movements were deliberate but unassuming. There was no rush, no need to announce her presence. She did not look around at the crowd, did not seek approval. She simply walked with quiet determination, letting her preparation and talent speak for themselves. People began to notice, some with surprise, others with disbelief. "Who is she?" whispered someone near the front. "I didn't even see her before," said another. Yet still, most of the guests underestimated her. Assuming she could not possibly live up to the expectations of the room, she reached the piano and paused for a moment. Her hands hovered above the keys and she closed her eyes, feeling the music inside her. The room seemed to grow quieter. Even the chatter from the crowd softened as if the world itself was holding its breath. The millionaire watched closely, his eyes narrowing slightly, trying to understand why his curiosity had been drawn to this quiet woman. He still had no idea what to expect, and that uncertainty made the moment all the more powerful. Then she pressed the first key. The note resonated softly but with clarity. It was simple yet precise. The sound seemed to capture something in the air that words never could. People turned their heads, looking at her in surprise. Some leaned forward, unsure whether they were witnessing a mistake or something remarkable. The woman did not falter. She continued, her fingers moving gracefully over the keys, each note flowing naturally into the next dot. At first, the music was subtle, almost hesitant. But with each passing moment, it grew stronger, more confident. The sound was not just music. It was emotion, experience, and expression combined. People could feel it. It reached past the luxurious walls, past the polite conversation, and touched something real inside everyone present. The millionaire, who had seen so much in his life, felt an unexpected chill. He realized that this was no ordinary performance. He did not yet know who she was, but he knew that what he was hearing was extraordinary. The crowd was silent now, their eyes fixed on the woman. Guests who had been laughing and chatting just moments ago were holding their breath, captivated by the music. Even those who had doubted her, who had judged her by her appearance, could not look away. The melody she played seemed to tell a story of struggle, of perseverance, of quiet strength. Each note carried meaning, and it was impossible to ignore. The woman's face remained calm, almost serene. She did not glance at the audience. She did not seek validation. She was fully immersed in the music, letting it flow through her and out into the room. The millionaire leaned closer, captivated. He could feel the power of her performance not just in the sound, but in the way it moved the room, in the way it commanded attention without demanding it. He had seen many talented musicians, but he had never experienced something like this. As the music continued, the room seemed to change. The chatter, the whispers, the polite laughter, all of it faded away. People forgot about appearances, status, and judgment. For a few minutes, they were simply witnesses to something real. Guests who had been skeptical now found themselves moved. Some were holding back tears, while others felt a deep sense of admiration. It was not just skill they were witnessing. It was honesty, vulnerability, and passion, all expressed through music. The woman's hands moved with precision, but also with feeling. There was a story in every chord, a meaning behind every rhythm. She had not planned to impress anyone, yet she could feel the room responding to her. The energy of the audience was subtle but undeniable. People leaned in, hearts beating faster, as if they too were a part of the music. The millionaire felt it more intensely than anyone else. He realized that he had underestimated her, that his assumptions had been wrong. And he felt a deep respect beginning to form in a way he had rarely experienced. Moments passed, and the melody shifted, becoming more complex and dynamic. The woman's skill was evident, but so was her heart. The audience could sense the years of practice, the sacrifices, and the determination that had led her to this moment. It was not flashy or showy. It was not about impressing or gaining attention. It was about connection, truth, and expression. And that truth resonated with everyone in the room, breaking down the walls of wealth, status, and pretense that had defined the evening so far. The millionaire watched closely, realizing that he had been completely wrong in his initial judgment. He had assumed she was unimportant, just another guest in a room full of appearances. Now he understood that talent, courage, and authenticity could not be measured by clothing, status, or social standing. This woman, whom he had barely noticed, was teaching him a lesson that no money or power could provide. Other guests were beginning to murmur in awe. Some exchanged glances, unable to believe what they were hearing. Many were smiling, some were nodding quietly, and a few had tears in their eyes. The woman's music had cut through the superficiality of the room, revealing something real, something pure, something unforgettable. Even the musicians who had been waiting nervously backstage felt the impact. They knew they were witnessing a performance that would be remembered. As the piece reached its crescendo, the woman's confidence grew. She had captured the room, and she could feel the energy of the audience responding to her. Every note was deliberate, every movement intentional, yet there was a natural flow that made the music feel alive. People were no longer thinking about status, appearances, or wealth. They were thinking only about the music, about the story being told, and about the woman who had stepped forward to share it. The millionaire felt a mix of emotions: surprise, admiration, and humility. He had expected a performance like many others he had witnessed over the years, polished but predictable. Instead, he was experiencing something profound, raw, and human. He realized that the woman had not only performed music, she had performed truth, and that truth had the power to change perceptions, to inspire, and to touch hearts. Finally, as the last notes faded into silence, the room remained still for a moment. No one moved. No one spoke. The weight of what they had just experienced hung in the air. Then slowly the applause began, first a few hesitant claps, then a wave of appreciation that filled the hall. People were on their feet, cheering, some wiping tears from their eyes. The millionaire, usually composed and reserved, found himself clapping with genuine admiration. He had seen many performances, but this was different. This was unforgettable. The woman rose from the piano, her expression calm and composed. She did not bask in the applause, did not bow excessively, and did not seek personal attention. She had shared her music, told her story, and expressed her heart. That was enough. Yet the impact of her performance lingered. The room had been transformed, even if only for a few moments. People had witnessed something real, something meaningful, something that could not be bought or faked. The millionaire approached her after the performance, his expression a mixture of curiosity and respect. He wanted to know who she was, what her story had been, and how she had come to be in that room, unnoticed yet so powerful. She smiled softly, acknowledging his interest without words. For her, the music had spoken louder than any introduction ever could. And he realized, in that moment, that he had been wrong to assume he understood her or anyone else in the room. Based on appearances alone, the evening had taken a turn no one expected. What began as a night of status and appearances had become a night of genuine emotion, authenticity, and talent. The quiet woman, once unnoticed and underestimated, had captured the hearts of everyone present. And for the millionaire, it was a lesson he would not forget. True greatness often comes from unexpected places, and sometimes the people we overlook have the most to teach us. The music had stopped, but the energy in the room did not fade. People were still clapping, some even cheering as if trying to express the awe they felt inside. It wasn't just the sound of the music, they were reacting to the story, the heart, and the presence behind it. The quiet woman at the piano had done more than perform. She had touched something deep within everyone present. Even the millionaire, who had been surrounded by wealth, power, and influence all his life, felt the impact in a way he could not ignore. For the first time that evening, he truly saw her. He looked beyond the simple dress, beyond the unassuming appearance, and saw the strength, the dedication, and the talent she carried quietly for years. The realization struck him suddenly. He had underestimated her. He had assumed that someone who blended into the background could not possibly be extraordinary. Now, he understood how wrong that assumption had been. Guests were still whispering among themselves, trying to understand what had just happened. Some were emotional, some were inspired, and some were quietly embarrassed that they had judged her too quickly. Many had expected a polished, predictable performance from someone they recognized, but they had been proven wrong. This woman, unnoticed and underestimated, had completely transformed the room. She had created a moment that was bigger than wealth, bigger than appearances, and bigger than social expectations. The millionaire stepped closer, moving through the crowd with a mixture of curiosity and admiration. He needed to know more. He wanted to understand how she could be so calm, so confident, and yet so powerful in her expression. Her talent had not only captured the audience, it had captured him. He realized that talent like hers did not come from privilege or opportunity. It came from hard work, passion, and an unwavering belief in oneself. And that was something money could never buy. Meanwhile, the woman remained calm. She did not seek attention or approval. She knew the music had spoken for her, and she felt no need to add more words. She had given everything she could to the moment, and that was enough. Yet, she could sense the change in the atmosphere. People were looking at her differently now. The same eyes that had ignored her were now filled with respect, curiosity, and admiration. The millionaire, in particular, seemed different. He was no longer observing from a distance. He was engaged, genuinely interested, and perhaps a little humbled. The millionaire finally reached her and offered a polite but sincere nod. "That was extraordinary," he said quietly. "I've never heard anything like it." His words were simple, but the weight behind them was undeniable. He had been in the presence of talent before, but this was different. It wasn't just skill or technical ability, it was heart, soul, and authenticity combined. It was the kind of performance that could not be measured by wealth, reputation, or social standing. She smiled softly, acknowledging his words without overemphasizing them. There was a quiet confidence in her expression, a sense that she knew the power of her music and did not need anyone's validation. She had been prepared for this moment, but she had not expected recognition. Her goal had never been to impress anyone. It had been to express herself honestly and fully. Yet, seeing the millionaire's reaction, she could tell that her music had reached him. It had broken through the barriers of assumption and status, and for a moment, he was seeing the world differently. Guests were beginning to approach her now, some offering congratulations, others asking questions about her background. She answered politely with grace and humility. She spoke little about herself, focusing instead on the music and the emotions it carried. People listened closely, fascinated not only by her talent but by the quiet strength and composure she displayed. The room was transformed. What had begun as a standard gala, filled with appearances and small talk, had become an experience of genuine human connection. The millionaire, however, was still processing what he had witnessed. He had lived a life of control, influence, and judgment, yet this woman had reminded him of something he had forgotten. True greatness cannot be measured by money or power. It cannot be judged by appearances or status. It comes from heart, dedication, and the courage to be authentic. And she had all of that in abundance. As the applause slowly faded, a quiet hush settled over the room. People were reflecting on what they had just experienced. Many were moved to tears, while others simply nodded in silent admiration. The woman had not only performed music, she had told a story without words, shared a piece of herself, and left an indelible mark on everyone who had witnessed it. The millionaire, standing nearby, felt a sense of humility he had rarely experienced. He realized that in a room full of people trying to impress, she had been the only one truly authentic. Slowly, the conversation in the room began to shift. Guests who had been focused on status and appearances were now discussing her performance, her talent, and the emotions it had evoked. They were comparing their expectations with the reality of what they had witnessed, and most were forced to admit that they had been wrong. The woman had reminded them of something they often forget: that talent and character cannot be judged by what is visible on the surface. The millionaire stepped closer again, this time with a sense of purpose. He wanted to understand her story. Who was she? How had she learned to play with such depth and emotion? How had she remained unnoticed for so long, yet carried such incredible skill and heart? He asked her directly, and she answered simply, without exaggeration. She spoke about years of dedication, practice, and perseverance. She spoke about the quiet moments of struggle, the sacrifices made, and the love for music that had carried her through challenges. Her words were simple, yet they resonated deeply. They were not about seeking recognition or reward. They were about truth, passion, and resilience. The millionaire listened intently, feeling a mixture of respect, admiration, and a hint of guilt. He realized that he had judged her too quickly, assuming that her quiet presence meant she was unimportant. Now he understood that he had been completely wrong. The woman's talent and heart had far more value than anything status or money could offer. Guests continued to gather around her, some asking questions, others offering quiet congratulations. The atmosphere was no longer about appearances, it was about connection, understanding, and shared human experience. People who had been skeptical now felt inspired. Some were even moved to tears, realizing that the performance had awakened something inside them. It was not just about music. It was about honesty, courage, and the power of expressing oneself fully, without fear or pretense. The millionaire remained near her side, observing not only her performance but her presence. He realized that her impact went beyond the music itself. She had changed the room, shifted perceptions, and reminded everyone that true talent and value cannot be measured by appearances. He felt a deep respect for her, one that could not be expressed with money or words alone. It was a respect born of witnessing authenticity, courage, and a rare kind of greatness. As the night continued, people gradually began to calm down, but the impression of the performance lingered. Conversations were now centered on the woman, her story, and the emotions she had stirred. Even those who had been skeptical or judgmental could not deny the impact she had made. She had become the focal point of the evening, not because she had sought it, but because her talent and authenticity demanded recognition. The millionaire took a moment to reflect. He had come to the event expecting a night of appearances, networking, and polished performances. Instead, he had experienced something real, raw, and unforgettable. He realized that he had been reminded of a truth he often overlooked, that true greatness and talent are not defined by status, money, or appearances. They are defined by heart, dedication, and authenticity. And she had all of that in abundance. Finally, he extended a hand to her, a gesture of genuine respect. "I want to learn more about you," he said quietly. "I want to understand how you came to have this gift and how you've carried it with such grace." She smiled softly, not out of vanity, but out of understanding. She had shared her music, told her story, and now, without seeking it, she had gained recognition not for appearances, but for her talent, her heart, and her authenticity. The crowd continued to buzz with quiet admiration, discussing what they had witnessed, but the millionaire remained focused. He had learned something invaluable that night. He had seen that true talent and greatness often go unnoticed. hidden in quiet corners, underestimated by those who judge by appearances. And he realized that sometimes it takes a single moment, a single performance, or a single act of courage to change the way people see the world. The woman had not sought recognition, yet she had earned it effortlessly through her dedication, skill, and authenticity. She had reminded everyone in the room, especially the millionaire, that what truly matters cannot be bought, faked, or measured by status. It must be experienced, felt, and recognized for the truth it carries. And in that moment, she had done exactly that. The applause had faded, but the impact of the performance lingered in the room like a quiet echo. People were still talking softly, their voices tinged with awe and admiration. The atmosphere had changed completely. What had started as a typical evening filled with luxury, appearances, and polite conversation had become something unforgettable, something real. The quiet woman who had been overlooked for so long had transformed the night. And no one, including the millionaire, could deny it. The millionaire, who had witnessed her performance from a close distance, stood silently for a moment, absorbing everything. He felt something he rarely felt: humility. He had been surrounded by wealth, power, and influence his entire life. He had seen countless talented people, some celebrated and others overlooked. Yet in all his experience, he had never encountered someone whose presence and skill could captivate so completely without demanding attention. He realized that he had been blind to something essential. True talent and greatness often do not announce themselves. They exist quietly, waiting for the right moment to shine. He stepped closer to her, his eyes searching for any clue about who she was and where she had come from. "I need to know your story," he said quietly, almost reverently. "How did you learn to play like that? How have you carried such talent quietly for so long?" She looked at him with a calm, gentle smile. Her eyes reflected years of struggle, practice, and patience. She did not need to boast, and she did not need validation. The performance had spoken for her. Yet she understood his curiosity and began to share, in her own simple way, the journey that had brought her here. She spoke of her childhood, growing up with very little in a world that often ignored her. Music had been her refuge, her escape, and her source of strength. She had spent countless hours practicing in silence, learning to express what words could not capture. There had been sacrifices, moments of doubt, and times when she wondered if anyone would ever recognize her talent. But through it all, she had kept playing, not for recognition, but because music was a part of her soul. The millionaire listened intently, captivated not only by her story but by her humility and strength. He realized that talent alone was not enough. It was courage, perseverance, and authenticity that made her extraordinary. She had not sought fame or reward, yet she possessed qualities that money, status, and influence could never provide. He began to understand that this quiet woman, whom he had overlooked at first, had something far more valuable than wealth or recognition. She had heart, soul, and integrity. Guests began to gather closer, curious to hear her story. They had watched her perform, and now they wanted to understand the person behind the music. Some had initially dismissed her, judging by appearances, but those judgments were gone now. They could see the truth. She was talented, authentic, and remarkable. She spoke simply, without exaggeration, yet every word revealed the depth of her experience. People listened in silence, touched by her honesty and inspired by her journey. The millionaire's perspective shifted completely. He had entered the evening focused on networking, appearances, and social expectations. He had assumed that value could be measured by status, connections, or wealth. But now he realized how wrong he had been. This woman had reminded him of something important, something he had long forgotten in his pursuit of power and influence. The most extraordinary things often come from unexpected places. And true greatness cannot be judged by appearances alone. He asked her how she had managed to stay so calm and focused, especially in a room filled with people who constantly sought attention. She smiled and explained that music had always been her guide. When she played, she was not performing for others. She was expressing herself, connecting with something deeper, and letting the music tell her story. Everything else, judgment, recognition, expectations, was secondary. That mindset had carried her through challenges and had prepared her. For moments like tonight, the millionaire was struck by the wisdom in her words. He realized that he had been too focused on superficial things, on appearances, and on expectations. She had taught him an important lesson, that humility, dedication, and authenticity hold far more power than wealth or influence ever could. He felt a mix of admiration and gratitude for the insight she had unknowingly shared with him. Around the room, other guests were having similar realizations. Many who had initially been skeptical or dismissive now approached her with respect and curiosity. They wanted to learn from her, to understand her perspective, and to hear more about the journey that had made her performance so extraordinary. It was clear to everyone that she had not only performed music, but had also performed courage, resilience, and integrity. Some guests whispered to each other, acknowledging how wrong they had been to judge her at first. They had assumed that wealth, polish, and appearances defined value, but her story and performance had shattered that illusion. She had shown them that true greatness often exists quietly, away from attention, and that the most meaningful achievements are not always visible at first glance. The millionaire finally asked her if she had ever imagined that her talent would lead to a moment like this. She shook her head gently. She had never sought fame, reward, or recognition. She had only sought to play, to express, and to share what music meant to her. And yet, here she was, captivating an audience that had underestimated her, including one of the most powerful men in the room. She had done what she set out to do, share herself through music. He nodded slowly, absorbing every word. He realized that her quiet strength and dedication were far more impressive than the social games he had been playing all evening. He understood that real influence, real power, and real respect are earned through authenticity, not appearances. And in that moment he felt a deep respect for her, a respect that could not be bought or commanded, only recognized. The room gradually began to calm, but the impression of her performance lingered. Guests were still talking softly, their conversations now filled with admiration, reflection, and inspiration. They were no longer thinking about appearances, wealth, or status. They were thinking about talent, courage, and authenticity. The woman had shifted the entire atmosphere of the event, reminding everyone that genuine skill and heart could not be ignored. No matter how hidden, the millionaire took a moment to reflect quietly. He realized that he had entered the evening expecting entertainment, networking, and social display. Instead, he had been reminded of something essential about life. The most extraordinary people often exist quietly, unnoticed, and it is only through attention, patience, and awareness that we truly see them. This woman had reminded him that assumptions can be misleading and that the most powerful experiences come from authenticity, not appearance. As the evening drew to a close, she remained calm, collecting her belongings quietly. Guests continued to approach her, offering congratulations, asking questions, and expressing admiration. She responded with grace and humility, never seeking to dominate attention, yet fully aware of the impression she had made. The millionaire followed, silently observing, reflecting on how profoundly she had changed his perspective in just a single evening. He finally spoke again, his voice quiet but sincere. "You've shown me something tonight that I hadn't realized for a long time. Talent, courage, and authenticity. They cannot be bought, forced, or faked. You've reminded me of the importance of recognizing true greatness, no matter where it comes from." She nodded gently, understanding the meaning of his words without needing to respond further. The recognition he offered was not about reward or status, it was about acknowledgement. Respect and understanding. Guests lingered in the room for a while, still discussing the performance and the woman who had transformed the evening. The event had become more than just a gala. It had become a lesson, an experience, and a memory that would remain with everyone present. They had been reminded of the power of authenticity, the value of talent, and the importance of looking beyond appearances to truly see people for who they are. The millionaire left the event that night with a changed perspective. He had seen someone who had quietly dedicated herself to her craft, someone who had shared her heart and soul through music without seeking recognition. He had learned that true value cannot be measured by wealth, appearances, or social standing. Instead, it is defined by heart, courage, and authenticity qualities that this quiet, unassuming woman possessed in abundance. As for the woman, she left the gala with a quiet sense of fulfillment. She had not sought attention or reward, yet she had achieved something far more meaningful. She had touched hearts, changed perspectives, and reminded people of the power of authenticity and dedication. Her performance had been her voice, her story, and her gift to the world. And in that moment, she knew that the effort, perseverance, and passion she had invested in herself had been worth every sacrifice. The night ended, but the impact of her performance remained. People would remember it for years to come, not just the music, but the lesson it carried. The millionaire would remember it too, forever changed by the reminder that true greatness often goes unnoticed until the right moment reveals it. And for everyone who had witnessed her play, the evening had been a powerful reminder. Appearances can be deceiving, assumptions can be wrong, and